I stood motionless as they lowered my grandfather's casket into the ground. The rhythmic creaking of the pulleys seemed to echo the breaking of my heart with each inch that separated us further. Rain pattered softly against my black umbrella, nature's tears joining mine in a symphony of grief. At 78, Grandpa William had been the last true pillar in my life, the only person who looked at me and actually saw me, Maya Carter, not just an inconvenience or an afterthought. "It's time to go, Maya," my mother Patricia said, her voice devoid of the emotion one might expect at her own father's funeral. Her mascara remained perfectly intact, not a single tear having threatened its pristine application. "Just a minute," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rain. "We don't have all day," she huffed, checking her watch with exaggerated impatience. "There's a reception to attend." The reception. Of course. Where my mother could play the grieving daughter to perfection, accepting condolences with manufactured sorrow while mentally calculating what she stood to gain from Grandpa's will. I knew the routine all too well. I said, "I need a minute." My voice found its strength, surprising us both. My mother's lips tightened into a thin line, but she retreated, joining my stepfather Richard and my step-siblings, Amber and Trent, who stood awkwardly under a large oak tree, more interested in their phones than paying respects to the man who had welcomed them into his home countless times with nothing but warmth. When the cemetery workers stepped back, signaling that their job was done, I approached the edge of the grave. I removed a single white rose from the arrangement nearby and tossed it onto the casket below. "I'll miss you every day," I said softly. "Thank you for loving me when no one else did." My grandfather was the only one who had truly been there for me after my father died when I was 8. While my mother quickly remarried and created her new perfect family with Richard, I became an uncomfortable reminder of her past. Grandpa William had been my sanctuary, my confidant, and the only adult who made me feel worthy of love. As I turned to leave, I caught Amber's eye. My 25-year-old stepsister, just a year younger than me, quickly looked away, pretending she hadn't been watching me. Unlike Trent, who had at least attempted civility over the years, Amber had always viewed me as competition for my mother's limited affection, though I had long since stopped trying to win that particular battle. "Finally," my mother muttered as I approached, "let's get this over with." The reception was held at Grandpa's house, my childhood home, until my mother had forced him to move to a smaller place 5 years ago, claiming it was for his own good. The large Victorian was filled with people I barely recognized, colleagues and neighbors who spoke of Grandpa with genuine fondness that made my heart ache even more. At least they knew the real him, not the senile old man my mother had tried to paint him as in recent years. I found a quiet corner, nursing a glass of water and watching as my mother worked the room, touching her eyes occasionally as if wiping away tears that never fell. "He loved you the most, you know," came a voice beside me. I turned to find Mr. Harrington, my grandfather's attorney and oldest friend, his kind eyes red-rimmed from genuine tears. "He was my world," I said simply. William knew that. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "The reading of the will is tomorrow at my office, 2 o'clock. Your mother knows." I nodded, dreading the formality of it all. Grandpa had never had much in terms of wealth, but the house and his modest savings would likely go to my mother. I didn't care about the inheritance. I just wanted more time with him. "Maya, Mr. Harrington said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Just be prepared. That's all I'll say." Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone, swallowed by the crowd of mourners who continued to arrive despite the rain that had turned from a gentle mist to a steady downpour. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in my apartment, listening to the storm outside and thinking about Grandpa's final months. The cancer had taken him quickly, at least sparing him prolonged suffering. I had visited daily, reading to him from his favorite books as he grew too weak to hold them himself. My mother had rarely shown up, always with an excuse about being busy with her real estate business or some function at Trent's University. My phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Don't be late tomorrow, and wear something appropriate." I didn't bother responding. After 26 years of her criticism, I had learned that engagement only invited more. Instead, I got up and went to my closet, pulling out the box where I kept the few mementos I had of my father and the many treasures Grandpa had given me over the years. Among them was a small wooden box with intricate carvings, mountains, and trees that seemed to ripple with life despite being etched in dead wood. "My father made this," Grandpa had told me when he gave it to me on my 16th birthday. "Inside is something more valuable than money, Maya. It's memory, and memory is the truest form of immortality we have." Inside the box was a collection of river stones, each perfectly smooth and unique. Grandpa and I had collected them during our summers by the creek that ran through his property, the one my mother had sold along with the house when she convinced him to downsize. I held one of the stones now, its cool surface warming in my palm. It was a ritual we had, finding the perfect skipping stone and then deciding it was too perfect to skip, adding it to our collection instead. "Some things are meant to be held on to," he would say, "not cast away." I fell asleep with the stone still in my hand, my dreams filled with running water and Grandpa's laughter echoing through the trees. The offices of Harrington and Associates were exactly as I remembered from the few times Grandpa had brought me along for his meetings. Wood-paneled walls, leather-bound books lining cherry bookshelves, and the perpetual scent of Earl Grey tea, which Mr. Harrington sipped religiously throughout the day. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a simple black dress that I hoped would meet my mother's definition of appropriate. To my surprise, I was the last to arrive. My mother sat primly in a leather chair, Richard beside her, while Amber and Trent occupied a small sofa against the wall. Mr. Harrington nodded to me as I entered, gesturing to the remaining chair. "Now that we're all here, we can begin," said, adjusting his glasses and opening a thick folder before him. "Finally," my mother sighed, shooting me a disapproving glance despite my punctuality. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat. "I'll dispense with the legal preamble and get straight to William's wishes as he instructed." He looked directly at me. "Maya, your grandfather was exceedingly proud of you. He wanted me to tell you that first." My mother shifted impatiently in her seat, but Mr. Harrington continued undeterred. "To my daughter, Patricia," he read, "I leave the sum of $20,000 with the hope that you will finally take that trip to Europe you've always talked about but never prioritized." My mother's face flushed. "20,000? That's it?" Mr. Harrington looked at her over his glasses. "There's more, Patricia. Please let me finish. To my grandchildren by marriage, Amber and Trent, I leave $5,000 each to be used toward your education or any pursuit that brings you true joy." Trent nodded, seemingly content with the gesture, while Amber's expression soured. "The rest of my estate," Mr. Harrington continued, "including my current residence, all its contents, my investments, and the sum of my remaining financial assets, I leave to my granddaughter, Maya Carter, who has shown me what it means to love unconditionally, and whose presence brightened even my darkest days." The room fell silent. I felt as if all the air had been sucked out, leaving me lightheaded and confused. "That's impossible," my mother finally said, her voice razor-sharp. "There must be a mistake." "There's no mistake," Mr. Harrington replied calmly. "William was of sound mind when he made these arrangements 6 months ago." 6 months ago, he was already sick, she argued. He wasn't thinking clearly. On the contrary, Mr. Harrington countered, he was thinking more clearly than ever. When, faced with his own mortality, William made decisions based on what truly mattered to him. I sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. Grandpa had left me everything, his house, his savings, which I now learned included substantial investments I'd known nothing about. All of it? This is ridiculous, Amber suddenly interjected. She manipulated him. She was always his favorite, always playing the poor little orphan card. My father is not dead, I said quietly. He might as well be, Amber spat. He abandoned you and your mother. At least my dad stuck around. That's enough, Richard said, surprising us all. It was the first time I could recall him ever disagreeing with his daughter. My mother stood abruptly. We'll contest this. William wasn't in his right mind. Maya's been filling his head with God knows what for years. Mr. Harrington remained unruffled. You're welcome to try, Patricia, but I assure you, William anticipated this reaction. He left a video testimony explaining his decisions, which would be presented in court if necessary. He paused. He asked me to play it for you today, regardless, but that's up to Maya now, as it's part of her inheritance. All eyes turned to me. I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't what I wanted. Not the money, not the house, and certainly not this new level of hostility from my already distant family. Play it, I said softly. Mr. Harrington nodded and pressed a button on his computer. A moment later, Grandpa's face filled the screen on the wall. My breath caught in my throat. He had recorded this during his final weeks, his face gaunt, but his blue eyes, so like my father's, so like mine, still bright with intelligence and purpose. If you're watching this, he began, his voice raspier than I remembered, then I'm gone, and Harry is reading my will. He coughed lightly. Patricia, I know you're angry right now. You've always had a flair for the dramatic. He smiled slightly. But this decision wasn't made to hurt you. It was made because, over the years, I've watched you build a life that doesn't need my financial support. You have Richard, you have your business, and you have created a comfortable existence for yourself. He paused, taking a labored breath. Maya, on the other hand, has only ever had me since Jonathan died. While you found a new life, she lost her whole world, and I became her only family, not by my choice, but by circumstance. My mother's face had turned crimson, but she remained silent as Grandpa continued. The truth is, I'm not leaving Maya. My worldly possessions as some kind of posthumous reward for her devotion, though God knows she's shown more of that than I deserved. I'm leaving them to her because I know she'll honor what they represent, not their monetary value, but the memories and love they contain. Tears streamed down my face as I watched him, knowing these were among his final thoughts, his final wishes. Patricia, Amber, Trent, I hope you can understand and respect my decision. And if you can't, well, that only confirms I've made the right choice. He leaned closer to the camera. Maya, my darling girl, don't let this change you. Material wealth is fleeting. The wealth of character you possess is eternal. I love you, kiddo. The screen went black, and the room remained silent for several long moments. Finally, my mother stood. You planned this, she hissed at me. Somehow, you orchestrated all of this. That's absurd, I said, finding my voice at last. I had no idea. Save it, she snapped. This isn't over, not by a long shot. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, Richard following dutifully behind her. Trent approached me awkwardly. For what it's worth, I think Grandpa William made the right choice, he said quietly, so Amber couldn't hear. You were there for him. We weren't. I was so surprised by his kindness that I could only nod. Amber brushed past us without a word, slamming the door on her way out. Well, Mr. Harrington said once we were alone, that went about as well as William expected. Why didn't he tell me? I asked, still stunned. He didn't want you to treat him differently in his final days. He wanted your time together to be about life, not about what would happen after his death. Mr. Harrington handed me a set of keys. These are yours now. And Maya, William was right about you. I've known you since you were a child, and you have a good heart. Don't let this situation harden it. I took the keys, their weight feeling suddenly significant in my palm, like the river stones in my wooden box, too precious to cast away. The first week after the will reading passed in a blur. I took time off from my job at the local library to begin sorting through Grandpa's house. My house now, a concept that still felt foreign and uncomfortable. My mother hadn't contacted me, but Amber had sent several scathing texts accusing me of everything from elder abuse to outright theft. I'd blocked her number after the third message. Trent, surprisingly, had stopped by with coffee and offered to help me go through some of Grandpa's things. His unexpected kindness was a small, bright spot in an otherwise overwhelming process. "Why? Are you being nice to me?" I asked him as we sorted through old photographs in the living room. "Your mom and sister clearly think I'm the villain in this story." Trent shrugged, pushing his glasses up on his nose, a nervous habit I'd noticed over the years. "My mom loves drama, and Amber's always been jealous of you." Jealous? Of me? I couldn't hide my disbelief. Why would she be jealous? She had everything. I didn't. A present mother, a father who stayed, family vacations, new clothes. "She didn't have William's love," Trent said simply. "Mom always made it clear that William preferred you, and it drove Amber crazy. She wanted to be the favorite granddaughter, but you didn't care. I had my dad's parents who doted on me. Amber's mom, Dad's first wife, took her parents away in the divorce. They barely acknowledge her." He picked up a photo of Grandpa and me fishing. "Besides, I always thought you were cool. You read the same books I did. You didn't make fun of my stutter when I was younger." I had forgotten about Trent's childhood stutter, which had gradually disappeared in his teen years. "You were a sweet kid," I said. "You still are, apparently." He blushed slightly. "Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation as a brooding academic to maintain." For the first time since Grandpa died, I laughed genuinely. It felt good, like releasing a breath I'd been holding for too long. That night, after Trent left, I continued exploring the house, rediscovering corners and crevices that had been part of my childhood. In Grandpa's study, I found his old roll-top desk, still organized just as he'd kept it. His reading glasses lay atop a stack of books, as if he'd just stepped away momentarily and would return any second to continue his reading. In the top drawer, I found a sealed envelope with my name written in his familiar, steady handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it. "My dearest Maya, if you're reading this, you found your way to my study, which doesn't surprise me. You always did love this room with its smell of important thoughts, as you used to say when you were little. I've left you many things, but the most valuable are not things at all. They're the memories we created together, the lessons we learned side by side, and the love that flows between us, a current that not even death can dam. There will be difficulties ahead. Patricia has always struggled with her emotions, and I fear my decision will bring out the worst in her. Be cautious, but don't let fear rule you. You have more strength than you know." In the bottom left drawer, there's a false panel. Behind it, you'll find documents relating to investments even Harry doesn't know about. Use them wisely, and remember that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in moments of genuine connection. I love you, kiddo. Always have, always will. Grandpa Kai, I. Sat with the letter pressed to my heart for a long time, tears flowing freely. Then, following his instructions, I found the hidden panel and the documents behind it. Stock certificates, deeds to 2 additional properties I'd never heard of, and a USB drive labeled "Watch Me." I connected the drive to my laptop and opened the single video file it contained. Grandpa's face appeared once again, but this time he looked healthier, the recording clearly made before his illness had advanced too far. "Maya," he began, his smile warm and familiar. "If you're watching this, then you found my little treasure trove. Don't worry, everything here is legitimate and above board. I just kept some investments separate over the years, building a nest egg specifically for you." He explained the various holdings, technology stocks he'd invested in decades ago that had grown exponentially, rental properties in neighboring counties that generated steady income, and a partnership in a small publishing company specializing in local history books. All told, it's worth about $3 million, he said matter-of-factly, as if he weren't speaking about a sum that made my head spin. It's not a fortune by today's standards, but it's enough to give you options, which is the greatest gift I can think to give you. Options, Maya. The freedom to choose your own path without financial constraints. I paused the video, needing a moment to process what I was hearing. $3 million, plus the house and the other assets Mr. Harrington knew about? This changed everything. Or did it? I still worked at the library because I loved books and the quiet community we served. I still lived simply, valuing experiences over possessions. Would this sudden wealth change who I was? I resumed the video. I know what you're thinking, Grandpa said, as if reading my mind across time. Will this change you? Only if you let it. Money is just a tool, Maya. In the right hands, your hands, it can build remarkable things. In the wrong hands, it destroys. He leaned forward. Patricia doesn't know about any of this, and I think it's best to keep it that way, at least for now. She'd only see it as another perceived slight, another reason to feel I loved you more. He sighed deeply. The truth is complicated. I do love you differently than I love Patricia. You remind me so much of Jonathan. Your kindness, your quiet, strength, your ability to find wonder in the smallest things. But I've always loved Patricia too, even when she made it difficult. She's her mother's daughter, passionate, driven, sometimes blinded by her own desires. I failed her in many ways, especially after your grandmother died. This was news to me. I'd always assumed the distance between Grandpa and my mother was entirely of her making. I hope someday she finds peace with herself and with you, Grandpa continued. Until then, be wise and be watchful. Patricia can be unpredictable when she feels wronged. The video ended with Grandpa showing me where to find the keys to the rental properties and the contact information for his financial advisor. I sat in his chair long after the screen went dark, feeling the weight of not just his financial legacy, but the emotional complexities he'd left behind. 3 weeks after the funeral, my mother called unexpectedly. Maya, she said, her voice uncharacteristically warm. It's been too long. I've been thinking about everything, and I realize I reacted poorly at the reading. I remained silent, suspicious of this sudden change of heart. I'd like us to have dinner. All of us. Richard, the kids, you. Family should stick together, especially after a loss. Why the sudden change? I asked, unable to keep the wariness from my voice. Can't a mother want to reconnect with her daughter? She sounded hurt, though I knew from experience how easily she could manufacture emotion when it served her purpose. Friday night, at the house, I'm cooking your favorite, lasagna. It wasn't my favorite. It was Amber's, but I didn't correct her. I'll think about it, I said non-committally. Please, Maya, I'm trying here. 7 o'clock Friday. After we hung up, I called Trent. Is this dinner real? I asked when he answered. As far as I know, he replied. Mom's been talking about it all week, says she wants to make amends. She even invited Dad's sister Annie, who she normally can't stand. Aunt Annie, Richard's sister, had always been kind to me on the rare occasions our paths crossed. She was an emergency room doctor who worked irregular hours, giving her a convenient excuse to limit her exposure to my mother's drama. Will you be there? I asked. Yeah, though I'm bringing work with me in case it goes south. Dissertation research waits for no family drama. I laughed, despite my misgivings. Okay, I'll come. Safety in numbers, right? Friday arrived with a sense of foreboding I couldn't shake. I dressed carefully in jeans and a simple blouse. Nice, enough to avoid criticism, but not so fancy that it seemed I was trying too hard. I brought a bottle of wine as a peace offering, though I doubted anything could truly bridge the chasm between my mother and me. The house I'd grown up in after Dad died, my mother and Richard's house, stood illuminated against the darkening sky when I arrived. It was a large colonial in an upscale neighborhood, meticulously maintained to project success and stability to the outside world, regardless of what transpired within its walls. Richard answered the door with an awkward smile. "Maya, good to see you. Come in." The smell of garlic and tomato sauce filled the entryway, along with the low murmur of conversation from the living room. I followed Richard to find my mother arranging a cheese platter while Amber texted furiously on her phone. Trent sat in the corner with a thick book open on his lap, as promised. Aunt Annie was nowhere to be seen. "Maya." My mother's voice was overly bright. "You came. I'm so glad." She embraced me stiffly, the unfamiliar gesture making me tense. "Annie's running late. Emergency at the hospital. But she'll be here." "Thanks for inviting me," I said, handing her the wine. "How thoughtful," she replied, examining the label with a practiced eye. "Not expensive enough," her expression said, "but—" she smiled anyway. "Richard, open this for us, will you?" Dinner was a stilted affair. My mother dominated the conversation with stories about her real estate successes and Amber's promotion at her marketing firm. Trent occasionally interjected with dry humor that went mostly unappreciated. I remained quiet, observing the familiar dynamics of a family I had never quite belonged to. "So, Maya," my mother said as she served dessert, a store-bought cheesecake I recognized from the local bakery. "How are you settling into William's house? It must be quite an adjustment." "It's going well," I said carefully. "Lots of memories. There." "I bet," Amber muttered, earning a sharp look from Richard. "Have you thought about selling?" my mother asked, her tone casual but her eyes alert. "That neighborhood has appreciated considerably. You could make a significant profit." "I'm not planning to sell," I replied. "It's home." My mother's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, if you change your mind, I'd be happy to list it. For you, no commission." "How generous," I said, matching her false warmth. "Speaking of generosity," she continued, rising to clear dessert plates, "I've been thinking about what your grandfather said in that video, about family and connections." She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a tea tray. "I made your favorite, chamomile with honey." This actually was my preference, surprising me with the unexpected accuracy of her memory. "Thank you," I said, accepting the delicate china cup she offered me. It was from her special occasion set. I noticed another unusual touch. Trent closed his book, watching our interaction with undisguised interest. Amber had finally put down her phone and was observing me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "A toast," my mother said, raising her own teacup. "To new beginnings and healing old wounds." We all raised our cups dutifully. I brought mine to my lips, but paused, noticing a strange glint in my mother's eye as she watched me, an eagerness that felt out of place. Instinctively, I lowered the cup without drinking. "Is something wrong with the tea?" my mother asked, her voice tight. "It's still too hot," I lied, setting it down. "I'll let it cool a bit." The conversation resumed, but my mother kept glancing at my untouched tea with increasing frequency. When Amber reached for a cookie from the plate beside me, I saw an opportunity. "Here, try my tea," I said impulsively, sliding my cup toward her. "Mom made it special." Before my mother could interject, Amber had raised my cup to her lips. "I prefer coffee, but whatever," she said, taking a large sip. My mother's face drained of color. "Amber, no," but it was too late. Amber had already swallowed the tea, her expression puzzled at our mother's reaction. "What?" she asked. "It's just tea." Richard frowned. "Patricia, what's going on?" My mother's hands trembled slightly as she gathered herself. "Nothing. That cup was for Maya. I made a different blend for everyone else. Why would you—" Trent began, but his question was interrupted by Amber suddenly standing up. "I don't feel so good," she said, her voice slurring slightly. I'm really dizzy. Before anyone could react, Amber collapsed, knocking over her chair and falling heavily to the floor. Amber! Richard rushed to his daughter's side as she lay unconscious, her breathing shallow. I stood frozen in shock, the realization of what had happened. What had nearly happened to me, crashing over me like a tidal wave. What did you do? I whispered, staring at my mother in horror, her face contorted with fury and fear. This is your fault, she hissed. It wasn't meant for her. Call 911, Richard shouted, cradling Amber's limp form. Trent already had his phone out, his face ashen as he reported what had happened. I heard him say, possible poisoning and unconscious as the room began to spin around me. My mother lunged toward the teacup, but I was faster, grabbing it before she could reach it. Don't touch it, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. The police will need this. You've ruined everything, my mother spat, her carefully constructed facade crumbling completely. You always ruin everything. The next few hours passed in a nightmarish blur. Paramedics rushing in, Amber being loaded onto a stretcher, police officers separating us for questioning. I clutched the teacup, refusing to let it out of my sight until a detective in plain clothes gently took it from me, sealing it in an evidence bag. You're saying your mother intended this tea for you? She asked, her kind eyes belying the sharpness of her questions. Yes, I said, still in shock. She made a point of saying it was just for me. When I switched cups with Amber, she tried to stop her from drinking it. And why would your mother want to harm you? I explained about Grandpa's inheritance, about the sudden invitation to dinner after weeks of silence, about the strained relationship that had existed between us for as long as I could remember. By morning, my mother had been arrested for attempted murder. The tea, tests quickly revealed, contained a potentially lethal dose of prescription sleeping medication ground to a fine powder. Medication prescribed to my mother for her occasional insomnia. Amber survived, thankfully, though she spent 2 days in the hospital recovering. I visited once, standing awkwardly in the doorway of her room until she noticed me. Come to gloat? She asked weakly. No, I said. I came to say I'm sorry. It should have been me in that bed, not you. Amber looked away. Mom confessed, you know, to the police. Said she wanted what William left you. Said it wasn't fair that you got everything when you weren't even real family anymore. The words stung, even though I'd heard variations of the sentiment throughout my life. We might not be close, Amber, but I would never have wished this on you, I said quietly. I know, she replied after a long pause. That's why you switched the cups, isn't it? You suspected something. I nodded. It didn't feel right, the way she was watching me, waiting for me to drink. She's always been good at hiding who she really is, Amber said, a new bitterness in her voice. I just never thought she'd... She trailed off, tears filling her eyes. I stepped closer, unsure if my presence was helping or hurting. The doctors say you'll be fine. Physically, maybe. She wiped her eyes roughly. Do you know what it's like to realize your mother was willing to commit murder for money? That she valued a house and some investments more than another human life? Than your life? I'm beginning to understand, I said softly. For the first time, Amber looked at me, really looked at me, with something other than contempt or competition in her eyes. I guess you are, she conceded. Look, I don't expect us to be friends, but thank you for coming to check on me. It wasn't forgiveness or a breakthrough, but it was something, a tiny crack in the wall between us, letting in the faintest glimmer of potential understanding. The trial came 6 months later. My mother maintained her innocence despite her initial confession, claiming temporary insanity from grief over her father's death. Few believed her, especially after evidence emerged of her researching untraceable poisons and inheritance law. in the weeks leading up to the dinner. I testified reluctantly, hating every moment under the harsh lights of the courtroom, feeling my mother's hateful stare as I recounted what had happened. Richard and Trent testified as well, both still shell-shocked by the revelation of who Patricia truly was. Amber's testimony was perhaps the most damning. Her own mother had shown more concern for the failed murder attempt than for her daughter's well-being. In the end, Patricia Carter Wilson was sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder. As they led her away, she turned to look at me one last time. "You took everything from me," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Everything." "No, Mom," I replied quietly. "You gave everything away yourself." I didn't attend any of her appeals or respond to the letters she sent from prison, the first communication she had initiated with me in years that didn't involve money or obligation. Trent told me they were mostly self-pitying diatribes about how she had been wronged by everyone in her life. I didn't need to read them to know their content. I had heard variations of that story my entire life. Richard filed for divorce while Patricia awaited trial, unable to reconcile the woman he'd married with the person capable of such calculated malice. He sold the house and moved to Arizona to be closer to his aging parents. Trent finished his dissertation and accepted a teaching position at a university in California. We kept in touch sporadically through emails and occasional phone calls. The biggest surprise came from Amber, who appeared at my door one rainy afternoon about a year after the trial. "I've been in therapy," she announced without preamble when I opened the door. "Turns out I have a lot of issues." I couldn't help but smile at her bluntness. "Don't we all? Can I come in? It's pouring out here." I stepped aside, allowing her into Grandpa's house, my house, which had undergone some subtle changes as I'd gradually made it my own while preserving the essence of what had made it his. "Nice place," she said, looking around with new eyes. "You've done some work on it." "Just some updates," I replied. "The bones were always good." We sat in the kitchen, awkwardly at first, as I made coffee and set out the cookies I'd baked the day before. Baking had become a form of therapy for me. The precise measurements and predictable outcomes, a comforting contrast to the chaos of the past year. "I've been thinking a lot about us," Amber said finally, "about how things were growing up. My therapist says I was jealous of you because Mom was always comparing us. She'd point out how smart you were, how self-sufficient, how you never asked for anything. It made me feel like I always asked for too much." "That's ironic," I said, "because from my perspective, she gave you everything and me nothing." Amber nodded. "That's the thing about Patricia. She played us against each other so well that neither of us could see the whole picture. She'd tell me how William favored you, then tell you how much she did for me. She created these competing narratives where we were both somehow getting less than the other. The insight struck me with its simple truth. My mother had indeed been a master manipulator, keeping everyone off balance and fighting for scraps of affection or approval that she carefully rationed to maintain control. "I'm not saying we're going to be best friends," Amber continued, stirring her coffee absently. "We probably have too much history for that. But I thought maybe we could, I don't know, start over? As adults who recognize we were both kids caught in a toxic situation?" "I'd like that," I said, surprised to realize how much I meant it. From that tentative beginning grew a cautious relationship. We began meeting monthly for coffee, sharing stories not just about our childhood, but about our current lives. Amber had quit her marketing job and returned to school to study psychology, inspired by her own therapeutic journey. I had reduced my hours at the library to pursue writing, a passion Grandpa had always encouraged. I used part of my inheritance to establish a foundation in Grandpa's name, providing scholarships for students pursuing careers in education, his profession before retirement. The rest I invested carefully, following the advice of his financial manager, with enough set aside to live comfortably without being extravagant. On the anniversary of Grandpa's death, I invited Trent, Amber, and Aunt Annie, who had remained a supportive presence throughout the ordeal, to the house for a small remembrance gathering. We sat on the back porch, watching the sunset and sharing stories about William. Funny moments, wise advice he'd given, the quiet ways he'd shown love. He used to slip me $20 bills whenever Mom wasn't looking, Trent recalled with a smile. Said it was book money, even though he knew I'd spend it on video games. He taught me how to change a tire when I was 16, Amber added. Said no woman should have to wait for a man to solve a problem she could fix herself. He called me every year on my birthday, Annie said, even though I'm not technically related to him, never missed once in 20 years. I listened, my heart full of gratitude for these glimpses of Grandpa through other eyes. When it was my turn, I shared something I'd never told anyone. After Dad died, I had terrible nightmares. I'd wake up screaming, convinced I was trapped in the car with him, underwater, unable to breathe. My voice caught at the memory of my father's accident, the car swerving off the bridge, the river claiming him while I was safely at school. Grandpa would sit with me every night, reading aloud until I fell asleep again. He did this for months, never complaining, never rushing. The stories. When the nightmares finally stopped, I asked him if he was glad he didn't have to read to me anymore. I smiled through tears. He said, Maya, there's nothing in this world I wouldn't do to keep you safe, but selfishly, I miss our midnight stories. They were just for us, a secret world where nothing bad could touch you. As darkness fell, we lit candles and placed them along the porch railing, small beacons of remembrance that flickered against the night. In the warm glow, I could almost feel Grandpa's presence, his quiet approval of this unlikely gathering of broken family pieces trying to form something new. Later, alone in the house after everyone had gone, I sat in Grandpa's old chair, my chair now, and opened the wooden box of river stones. I selected one, smooth and gray with a streak of white quartz running through it like a scar that had healed but left its mark. Some things are meant to be held on to, I whispered, echoing Grandpa's words from long ago, not cast away. I understood now what he'd meant, not just about the stones, but about the people in our lives, the memories we create with them, and the love that remains even when everything else is lost. My mother had cast away what truly mattered in pursuit of things that ultimately meant nothing. In doing so, she had lost everything that gives life its meaning. I placed the stone on the windowsill where it would catch the morning light, a reminder of the choices I would make differently. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for growth and connection. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, but for the first time since Grandpa's death, I felt ready to walk it, scarred but stronger, like the stone with its vein of quartz, transformed by pressure into something more beautiful than before. In the quiet house, surrounded by memories both painful and precious, I made a silent promise to honor Grandpa's true legacy, not the material wealth that had nearly destroyed what remained of my family, but the capacity for unconditional love that had saved me time and again. That was the inheritance that mattered, the one no one could ever take away. 5 years passed, each day carrying me further from the trauma of my mother's betrayal and closer to the person I was meant to become. The foundation I'd established in Grandpa's name had grown, now supporting dozens of students each year. I'd published 2 novels, quiet, contemplative stories about family secrets and the healing power of truth, that had found modest but appreciative audiences. Amber completed her psychology degree and opened a practice specializing in family trauma. We'd developed a genuine friendship, meeting regularly for hikes in the woods behind my house where Grandpa and I had once collected our river stones. Trent had married a fellow professor and welcomed twins, a boy and girl who would never know their grandmother, but who brightened our lives with their curious minds and easy laughter. I received occasional updates about my mother from the prison chaplain who had taken an interest in her case. She had become something of a model prisoner, teaching GED classes to younger inmates and participating in restorative justice programs. Part of me wanted to believe she had changed, that she had found genuine remorse in the stark confines of her cell, but I remained cautious. Patricia had always excelled at showing people what they wanted to see. On a crisp autumn morning, Grandpa's favorite kind of day, I received a letter with the prison's return address. Unlike the others that had come before, this one was thin, containing just a single page. I recognized my mother's handwriting, more angular than I remembered, as if written by a hand that had grown unused to the gentle curves of everyday correspondence. Maya, I've written you many letters over the years, letters you've never answered. I don't blame you for that. I wouldn't answer me either. The chaplain here, Reverend Mills, has been helping me understand what I did, not just to you, but to Amber, to our entire family. It's taken me a long time to accept responsibility, to stop blaming everyone else for choices that were mine alone. I won't ask for your forgiveness. I haven't earned it, and you owe me nothing. But I wanted you to know that I am sorry, not because saying so will change anything between us, but because it's true, and because after a lifetime of lies, I'm trying to build whatever time I have left on truth. Your father would be proud of the woman you've become. Your grandfather, too. I wish I could say I had some part in the strength and grace you've shown, but we both know that isn't true. Those qualities came from them and from within yourself. I hope you are well. I hope you are happy. I hope the weight of what I did doesn't keep you from embracing all the good that life can offer. Patricia. I read the letter twice, searching for the manipulation, the subtle blame shifting, the underlying agenda that had characterized my mother's communication throughout my life. Finding none, I felt strangely unmoored, as if a foundational truth I'd built my understanding of the world upon had suddenly shifted. People can change. It was a simple concept, one I'd explored in my writing, one I believed applied to almost everyone. Why had I never allowed for the possibility that it might apply to my mother as well? I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I carried the letter with me for days, rereading it in quiet moments, weighing its sincerity against years of experience. I discussed it with Amber during one of our walks. "Do you think she means it?" I asked as we paused beside the creek, watching the water flow over stones, worn smooth by time and persistence. Amber considered the question carefully. "I think she might. Prison has a way of stripping people down to their essence. Some get worse, but others find parts of themselves they buried long ago." She skipped a stone across the water, counting the bounces. 5, not bad. Grandpa's record was 9, I said, smiling at the memory. "Show off," Amber teased. Then, more seriously, "Whatever you decide about Mom, do it for yourself, not for her. You don't owe her a relationship, even if she has changed." "I know," I said, "but I keep thinking about what Grandpa said in his letter to me, about true wealth being measured in moments of genuine connection. I've found that with you, with Trent, with friends who've become like family. Maybe there's some value in seeing if there's anything salvageable with her, too. Just be careful," Amber warned. "Protect your heart." 2 weeks later, I sent my mother a short response, not promising forgiveness or reunion, but acknowledging her letter and expressing cautious appreciation for her apparent growth. It was a small step, tentative and uncertain, but it was something. Her reply came quickly, thanking me for responding and respecting the boundaries I'd set. We began a careful correspondence, exchanging letters every few weeks. I shared selective details about my life, my writing, the foundation, neutral topics that felt safe, while she told me about her daily routine in prison, the women she taught, the books she read. 6 months into this fragile communication, she wrote something that finally convinced me her change might be genuine. "I've been thinking lately about your father, about how I tried to erase him from our lives after he died, as if removing all traces of Jonathan would somehow make the pain disappear. That was cruel and selfish, especially to you. He was a good man who loved you completely. You deserve to keep his memory alive, and I took that from you. It's one of my deepest regrets. No one had witnessed this particular cruelty. The way she had packed away my father's photographs, donated his clothes without letting me keep even a single item, changed our phone number so his family couldn't reach us. It was a private wound she had inflicted, one I had never spoken about to anyone, not even Grandpa. That she would acknowledge it now, unprompted, suggested a level of reflection I hadn't thought her capable of. After consulting with Amber and Trent, both of whom supported whatever decision I made while urging continued caution, I agreed to visit my mother in prison. The meeting was arranged for a Tuesday morning in early spring, almost 6 years to the day since she had tried to poison me. The prison visiting room was brighter than I expected, with murals painted by inmates covering one wall and children's toys stacked neatly in a corner. I sat at an assigned table, hands folded to hide their trembling, and waited. When my mother entered, I almost didn't recognize her. The carefully maintained blonde hair had turned completely gray, worn in a simple bob that emphasized the new lines around her eyes and mouth. She had lost weight, the designer clothes replaced by a standard-issue uniform that hung slightly loose on her frame. But the most striking difference was in her eyes, the calculating coldness replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. "Maya," she said, her voice catching. "You came." "I said I would," I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness of my tone. She sat across from me, keeping her hands in her lap. "Thank you. I know this can't be easy." "It's not," I agreed. We talked haltingly at first, navigating the vast emotional terrain between us with careful steps. She asked about my books, listening intently as I described the publishing process. I asked about her teaching, noting the genuine animation that entered her expression as she spoke about her students. "Why did you do it?" I finally asked, the question that had haunted me for years. "Was it really just about the money?" She didn't pretend to misunderstand. "No," she said after a long pause. "The money was part of it, but it was more about what the inheritance represented. Dad choosing you over me, loving you more. It felt like the final rejection in a lifetime of feeling like I was never enough." "Grandpa loved you," I said. "He told me so. I know that now. But I couldn't feel it then. I was too consumed by jealousy and resentment, not just toward you, but toward my own father, toward Jonathan for dying and leaving me alone, toward everyone who seemed to navigate life more easily than I did." She met my gaze directly. "None of that excuses what I did. I made choices, terrible, unforgivable choices. I just want you to know that it wasn't simply about greed." We talked for the full hour aloud, touching on memories both painful and healing. As our time drew to a close, she asked the question I had been dreading. "Do you think you could ever forgive me, Maya? Not now, maybe not for years, but someday?" I considered my answer carefully. "I'm working on it," I said finally. "Not for your sake, but for mine. Holding on to the anger and betrayal hurts me more than it hurts you." She nodded, accepting this limited offering with a grace I wouldn't have thought possible from the woman who had raised me. "That's fair," she said, "more than fair." As I stood to leave, she remained seated, respecting the physical and emotional distance between us. "I'm proud of who you've become, Maya. I had nothing to do with it, but I'm proud nonetheless." Walking out of the prison that day, I felt a subtle shift within myself, as if a door long sealed had cracked open just enough to let in a sliver of light. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. A seedling of healing taking tentative root in soil I had thought permanently poisoned. I continued visiting every few months, each meeting less strained than the last. Amber joined me occasionally, her professional training allowing her to navigate the complex emotions with more skill than I possessed. Trent sent letters and photos of the twins, but chose not to visit, a boundary my mother respected without complaint. When Patricia was released on parole after serving 12 years, I helped her find an apartment in a nearby town, close enough for occasional visits, but with enough distance to maintain the boundaries we both still needed. She found work as a tutor at a community college, her real estate license long since revoked. Our relationship would never be what might be considered normal between mother and daughter. Too much had happened, too many years lost, too many wounds, inflicted that had scarred over but never completely healed. Yet there was something there. Not the unconditional love Grandpa had shown me, but a careful, mindful connection built on hard-earned truth rather than obligation or pretense. On the 20th anniversary of my father's death, I invited my mother to join me at his grave, a place I had visited annually, but she had never returned to after the funeral. We stood side by side in the autumn sunshine, placing white roses beside the headstone. "He used to bring me white roses every anniversary," she said softly. "Said they reminded him of my wedding dress." "I didn't know that," I replied, treasuring this small piece of their history I had never heard before. "There's so much I should have told you about him," she admitted. "So many stories I kept to myself because they hurt too much to share." "Tell me now," I said. "I want to hear them." And there, beside my father's grave, my mother began to share the man she had known, the college sweetheart who wrote her terrible poetry, the nervous new father who read parenting books in secret, the husband who danced with her in the kitchen when no one was watching. With each story, my father became more real to me, no longer just the idealized memory of a child, but a complex, loving man who had been taken too soon. As we walked back to our cars, my mother hesitated, then spoke the words I realized she had been working toward for years. "I'm sorry I tried to erase him," she said. "And I'm sorry I tried to erase you. You deserved better from me." "Yes," I agreed, "I did." But I reached out and squeezed her hand briefly, not absolution, but acknowledgement of the truth we now shared. It was enough for today. Perhaps with time and continued effort on both sides, it might someday be enough for tomorrow as well. I drove home to Grandpa's house, my house, with the windows down, letting the crisp autumn air flow around me. The river stones I had collected as a child sat on my dashboard, catching the late afternoon sunlight, each one a memory preserved, a piece of the past carried into the present. Some things are meant to be held on to, not cast away. Grandpa had been right about that. The wisdom was in knowing which were which and having the courage to make the choice.